Hugh Hewitt live in Studio West. So pleased to welcome former UN ambassador and former governor of South Carolina, Nikki Haley, back to the program for her first interview after declaring for the presidency. Madam Ambassador, welcome. Good morning.
Good morning, Hugh. It's great to be with you again.
Thank you. Now, since we cover all of New Hampshire, the Granite State is 100% covered by this conversation. Most of Iowa, a lot of South Carolina, and almost all of Florida. I hope you'll keep coming back.
Absolutely.
All right. The first question is the Roger Mudd's famous question. Why do you want to be president?
I don't want to wait on anyone else to fix it. I look at where we are in the country and I see that we're $31 trillion in debt and we're spending like drunken sailors and we need to put Washington, D.C. on a diet. I see our kids have fallen so far back in education, we don't know how we're going to catch them back up, and we've got to focus on that next generation. I see the fact that we've got crime in our streets, we've got open borders, that our minds are being closed from woke ideology, and I see a foreign policy that's in shambles. And, I was a two-term governor who took a failed double-digit unemployment state, and I turned it into an economic powerhouse. And I was an ambassador at the UN that didn't deal with one country. I dealt with 192, and I took the kick me sign off of our backs. And I want to get America to a place where she's strong and proud again, and I want to do that for our kids.
So I reframe it again like Roger Mudd did. You have the issue set down, and we'll talk about each of them. But why does Nikki Haley want to be the president?
Because I know I can fix it. I know I can get this done. I have always been a problem solver. And I know that when my parents came to this country over 50 years ago, they came to a country that was strong and confident and full of opportunities. And I look at the national self-loathing that is happening now, and I look at this creep into socialism that's happening now, and I see that our kids are getting further and further away from the patriotic reasons to love our country. We can't be this way. Over 50% of parents in this country think that their kids won't have the same life or better than they had. That's a very sad state of affairs. And, I have two children. I have a daughter that's getting married, and I see how hard it is for her and her fiance to try and buy a home. I have a son that's a junior in college, and I see that he's writing papers that he doesn't believe in just to get an A. And that's not okay. I'm not going to leave that country for my kids. I want us to get back to where our children love America again. And I'm going to fight to make that happen.
Now, Ambassador Haley, a lot of people are going to run. What is your unique appeal, your vision that is different from, say, former President Trump, Governor DeSantis, former Secretary of State Pompeo? Lots of people are running. Kristen Sununu, Mike Pence, maybe your fellow South Carolinian Tim Scott. What is unique about the Haley appeal?
Well, I think look at my record. I mean, I have been a chief executive. I've been a governor. I've run a state. I've had to deal with crises. I've had to balance a budget. I've had to manage a National Guard. I've had to work with hurricanes and floods. And I reformed education, passed voter ID, and passed an Arizona-style e-immigration law. I took 20,000 people from welfare and put them to work and created reforms in our prison system that gave us the lowest recidivism rate in the country. When I went to the UN, I dealt with thugs and dictators every day. We passed the largest sanctions against any country in a generation in North Korea. We helped get out of the Iran deal. We pushed for the embassy to be moved from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. But more than that, we made sure we had the backs of our allies, and we held our enemies to account, and we made America strong again. I've got the executive experience, I've got the foreign policy experience, and I've got a love for a country that I am determined to get back on her feet again.
But in a multi-party candidate race, it's all about differentiation. How are you going to differentiate from President Trump, Ron DeSantis, Mike Pompeo, all of the people running, Mike Pence? What's different?
Well, none of them have the experience that I have in terms of what I've led and how I've done it, in terms of state experience and foreign policy. But more than that, I've been to Iowa and I've been to New Hampshire. And what I saw is people want options. They don't want just Biden and Trump. And you're talking about a bunch of people who haven't even put their pants on to get in the race yet. I'm talking about the people who are in the race. And what I know is that people want options. They don't think you have to be 80 years old to be in Washington, D.C. They do agree with me that we need to have term limits in D.C. and clean it up. They do agree with me that we need to have mental competency tests for people over the age of 75. They do agree with me that we have to start balancing a budget. They do agree with me that we have to stop giving foreign aid to countries that hate America. And, we had thousands of people show up at our announcement in South Carolina. We had hundreds of people standing room only and overflow crowds in New Hampshire and Iowa, and it's because they want to know what their options are, and they want to move past the drama and get to solutions and do something different.
Now, Ambassador Haley, I've always appreciated you've been easy to reach. You've been easy to book. As you run for president, it's very important to engage, not just with the Hugh Hewitt Show, obviously, or Fox News, but everybody. People like the Ruthless Podcast, places that throw you hard and fast, high balls, fastballs at your head, and curveballs that are out of reach. Are you going to go everywhere and talk to everyone?
I'm doing the Ruthless Podcast today.
Are you really? They're my pals. That's great.
I have been in Iowa, New Hampshire, South Carolina. I'm going back to Iowa again next week. We've been all over this country. We're doing CPAC tomorrow. We're doing Club for Growth on Saturday. I mean, I am anywhere and everywhere. You can't outwork me. And I think this is about earning the people's respect across this country and letting them know I am determined to make them proud in the way that we run this race. They deserve it. Americans deserve a better life than what they have right now. They deserve it. Their children deserve it, and we need to get them there.
Let's go to national security, Madam Ambassador. First, I believe that China, Russia, and Iran are a new axis of evil with Beijing as the senior partner and running the deal. What is your view of those three countries being an alliance and a de facto axis of evil?
It is absolutely the case. China and Russia made it clear to the world when they said they were unlimited partners. Iran is their junior partner. And if you look at what's happening right now, from Russia getting drones from Iran or missiles from North Korea to China now starting to make moves the way that they are, I mean, this is a serious alliance that we have to start really taking seriously. And that doesn't mean we react to them. That means we let them know what we expect of them. And I can tell you, we need to start with telling them that we don't want Americans looking to the sky and seeing a Chinese spy balloon looking back at us.
So when you look at the front in Ukraine, and Russia has lost another major tank battle, the New York Times reports this morning, is that actually part of the Axis's front? Should Americans understand the war in Ukraine as just being an extension of the Chinese lurch for hegemony?
Americans need to understand that the war in Ukraine is bigger than Ukraine. It's about a war for freedom, and it's one that we have to win. Because, first of all, the Ukrainians have done a phenomenal job in really trying to gain their territories back. I mean, by the fact that, Russia has literally 500,000 people have left Russia. They've lost thousands of soldiers. They're getting desperate when they're getting things from Iran and North Korea. They've raised the draft age to 65. Putin knows he's in getting into a place where he doesn't know how to get out. But the biggest part of it is, if Ukraine wins, it sends a message to China, Russia, Iran, and North Korea not to go there. Russia has been very clear with us. We need to believe dictators when they say something. They said that Poland and the Baltics are next. We don't want a world war. Winning in Ukraine prevents further war. Losing in Ukraine means there will be more aggression by our dictators and less freedom around the world.
Ambassador Haley, there's been some differentiation among the Republican candidates, both declared and imminent, on weapons for Ukraine. Governor DeSantis has warned against a blank check. Former President Trump has denounced warmongers. Mike Pompeo and Tom Cotton are sort of on the other end. Send everything they need to win right now. Where's Ambassador Haley on that spectrum of Republican support for the people of Ukraine and President Zelensky?
Don't send money. Don't send troops. Send all the equipment and ammunition they need with our allies and make sure that they have everything they need to win. We can do it by way of equipment and ammunition and working with our allies. We don't have to do it with checks and troops.
Would you send F-16s and A-10s?
Yes, everything they need to win.
All right. Iran is close to breakout. They're at 86% of what they need to have a nuclear weapon. Would you support U.S. acting with or without Israel against Iran to destroy that program?
Well, I think we need to work with Israel. Israel's already onto it. Israel's already looking to move in that direction. I think we need to work with them, but we also need to work with our Arab allies. Saudi Arabia very much doesn't want Iran to get the the bomb either. We need to work with them, the Emiratis, the Qataris. We've got to make sure we work with more countries to stop Iran, and we have to call out China for helping them. That's
But
going to be key as we
Madam
go
Ambassador,
forward.
they're less than a month away. They can have a nuclear weapon within a month. If you were president, would you have already ordered a military strike on Iran to destroy that capacity?
If I was president, I would be having a meeting right now with Israel and the Arab countries saying, what are we going to do to stop it? This isn't just our fight alone. This is all of their fights. They are destruction to all terrorism. They are the number one state sponsor of terrorism. And we have to make sure we do everything to stop them. You don't just quickly say, oh, we're going to go to war. What you do is you get with your allies and see what that force is going to look like, and you get strategic in how you're going to do it. You know, the Arab countries, Saudi Arabia just gave $400 million to Ukraine. Don't think they don't have their eye on Iran closer or as much as Israel does. We need to make sure we get them together and say, what is our game plan, and then go forward.
If no one would support you, would you act unilaterally to destroy the Iranian ability to produce nuclear weapons?
I would do everything I could to stop Iran, but I'm not going to say what we're going to do, and I think that's the problem, is we don't need to tell our enemies what we're going to do. We need to work closely with our allies to make sure we have a good long-term vision to make sure we are preventing war.
Let's go to the triad, Madam Ambassador. I don't think we can afford the same kind of one-third, one-third, one-third that we've done. What is the most important leg of the triad and why?
Well, they're all important. Land, air, and sea matter, but you also have to add cyber and artificial intelligence to those. It's going to be very much a different kind of war. And cyber and artificial intelligence affect land, air, and sea now like it never has before. We need to be pushing on all cylinders. We need to create a strong military. We need to make sure we're modernizing our military, and we need to make sure we're at the top of our game. China is doing that right now, and we have to make sure that we can compete with that. They have the largest naval fleet in the world. They have more air defense systems than we do. We have not focused our military where it needs to be. Instead, you can ask my husband, the life of a combat veteran, they're doing gender pronoun classes. That's not where America needs to be. It needs to be having the strongest military in the world. There's nothing that scares the Russians, the Chinese, or the Iranians more than a strong military. A strong military doesn't start wars. A strong military prevents wars.
You know, W told me once in an interview that whenever anything gets to the president, it's only the controversial stuff and it's always the tough choices. Anything that can be avoided doesn't get to him or her. The fact is, funding cannot continue one-third, one-third, one-third for land, sea, and air. Everything matters. Cyber matters. AI matters. But the Columbia class, the updating of the Minutemen, the B-21, they compete for scarce resources. What's your priority among them?
Well, I think when you look at the Department of Defense, understand there's a lot of waste there, too. There's a lot of bureaucracy and red tape. We've got to cut all that out. We've got to start modernizing by way of making sure that more money is going to what it takes to prevent war and what we'll do to protect our national security. And so there are a lot of contracts that are slow. They reward certain companies and don't open it up to all companies. And we need to make sure that we have the top innovation, the best equipped, the strongest military, so that we can be at the top of our game. And that means jumping into Department of Defense, looking at their procurement programs, and figure out how we're going to move forward.
But, Madam Ambassador, I know you know this. There isn't enough waste, fraud, and abuse in the Department of Defense to fund the Department of Defense. There's certainly things that can be done. I'm going to circle back, third time to land the plane here. Do you have in your mind a clear priority as to where the next dollar gets spent in modernization of the triad?
I think you strengthen our military with innovation. We have to be at the top of our game on innovation. We can't have old submarines. We can't have old airplanes. We can't have missiles that aren't as ready to compete with Iran and China. We need to modernize everything we're doing to make sure it's at the top of our game. You don't look at just land or air or sea. You have to do it all. You have to make sure where are we slacking, where do we have top game, and what do we need to improve? And you work with innovators to make sure we do that. We've got to be smart and strategic again, not picking one or the other. We should be able to balance all of them at the same time. And if that means putting more money towards it, you do that. You do whatever it means to be strong in terms of our military and make sure other countries know we're not backing off.
We're about 3% GDP on defense budget right now, Madam Ambassador. Where should we be if we're serious about surviving as a free and independent republic leader of the West?
We need to look and ask our military, where do we stand if there was a war today? Where do we stand on all of those issues, and how do we get up to speed so that we could win that war?
And then spend whatever it takes.
And then you spend whatever it takes to make sure that we are ready. National security of Americans is the most important thing we should ever do. And making sure that we have the ability to protect Americans, no matter what, is of utmost importance.
Let me turn to some politics, Madam Ambassador. And this one is a difficult one. Does South Carolina matter less, since you and Tim Scott may be in the race? Does New Hampshire matter less because Chris Sununu is going to be in the race? Does Iowa just win it all because Florida is going to have the former president and the current governor in the race? It sort of scrambled the early, tickets out of Iowa, tickets out of New Hampshire, tickets out of South Carolina when you've got homegrown candidates, doesn't it?
No, I think I totally disagree. I mean, I'm incredibly popular in South Carolina, but if I don't do well in Iowa or New Hampshire, that's not going to matter. You can't just win Iowa and think that you're going to get South Carolina. It doesn't work like that. These states are very different, and they want you to come back over and over again. They want to shake hands with you over and over again, and they want you to get coffee breath close, asking the hard questions, being able to answer them. And I think coming from South Carolina, you've got good, hard-working people that know how hard it is to buy groceries for families. They know how tough it is to make sure their kids are getting a good education. They want safe streets. They want a strong America, and they're going to ask you how you're going to do it. And, when I went to Iowa, I appreciated their agriculture concerns are the same concerns that we had in South Carolina when it came to agriculture. But, this is also a state that's strong and proud, and they want to see a country that's strong and proud. You look at New Hampshire, and they have, so many veterans, and they want to know what you're going to do for veterans in that state. They want to know how you're going to help them. They are dealing with a terrible fentanyl crisis, and they want to know how that's going to happen. These are good Americans that are dealing with day-to-day issues, and every state is different. You can't look at them as being swayed because, one person's got this in the polls or one person's got that. They want to see you work. They want to see you earn it. And I think that they
So
that.
If New Hampshire's governor is in it, that does not discount the importance of New Hampshire.
No, I think Chris has been a great governor in New Hampshire, and I think the people of New Hampshire will respect that and like him for that, but they want to see all options. They're not going to just mindlessly go with one person. They're going to see everybody.
Let me go to the key domestic issue, and I believe this is key to this election, Governor. By the way, do you prefer ambassador or governor? I know you say either is better, but which do you prefer?
No, I prefer Nikki. Those were moments in time.
I don't do that. No. When you've got a father-in-law who's a colonel, you never go to the first name. But okay, I'll stick with ambassador. The most important issue in American parenting is going to be school choice. Now, Arizona and your colleague and friend Doug Ducey led the way with the most revolutionary school choice. It's universal. Utah and Iowa has followed. Arkansas signed it. It got started in Florida and West Virginia with programs that were expanding. Ohio is stuck. They're not sure yet. What did you do in South Carolina on the school choice front when you were the governor?
So we expanded charter schools in our state, and we pushed for school choice, and at the time it was very difficult, but we did allow for choices. We did help homeschoolers quite a bit. We did also pass a state bill that said any child that can't read by third grade could not go to the fourth grade, because we knew that if you can't read by third grade, you're 4 times less likely to graduate high school. But I'll give you this, Hugh. Think about this. Pre-COVID, 70% of eighth graders in our country were not proficient in reading. 66% of eighth graders were not proficient in math. Now you put closed down schools and COVID, and think how far back they are. If ever there was a time to have nationwide school choice, it is now. The number of homeschoolers in our country has multiplied times 5. The majority of them are African Americans. They didn't have the luxury of either the money to go to a private school or a waiting list because there were so few private school options. We need to open up the competition. We need to put parents in charge. But more than that, look at what kids are learning. You've heard about critical race theory. Everybody's talked about that. But think about what they're doing with the gender stuff. And you had Florida. Florida, they talked about the Don't Say Gay bill and said, you shouldn't talk about to any child before the third grade about gender. No, that doesn't go far enough. When I went to school, you didn't have sex ed until 7th grade. And even then, your parents had to sign a permission slip. And my dad wouldn't sign it. So I was the uncool kid in the classroom next door. Parents need to be teaching their kids this, not schools. You don't need to be talking about gender. You don't need to be talking about race. You need to be teaching them math, science, history, and understand that your job is to create responsible citizens. Not
So is the
to
Doug
enforce
Ducey
these
model
culture
the
wars.
one that every state should embrace if they've got the votes in the Republican legislature to do so?
Look at the Doug Ducey model, but look at the Kim Reynolds model, too. Iowa and Arizona did a fantastic job with school choice, and that is what we should try and get every state to do. I think it would be fantastic.
Two more questions, Governor. The biggest criticism leveled at you thus far by the pro-Trump wing of the party is that you left early. You didn't stick for 4 years. What's your answer to that?
Because D.C. thinks that you have to stay in D.C. forever. That's the problem. They think that that's ridiculous. I mean, if you look at the wall of UN ambassadors, the average time any UN ambassador stays is 2 years. In D.C. promotes longevity. D.C. promotes you staying forever because they think that's how you get power. I went in there, I did a job, I did it very well, and then I know that when it's time, you have to allow fresh voices and fresh ideas to get in there. I believe in term limits. I'm always going to do that. I put in 8 years of 7 hours a day, 24 hours a day of keeping my state and my country safe, and I'm proud of the work I did, and I think the results speak for themselves.
Last question has to do with the practicalities of running. Vivek Ramaswamy was on the program this week, and he's a charming and wonderful, bright guy. Some gaps in his resume, which he'll fill, but he's got $500 million he's going to self-fund. You need small donors, you need big donors. How do you compete against that, Ambassador?
You go and you touch as many hands as you can. You earn the credit of the American people. You tell them to go to NikkiHaley.com and pitch in $5, $10, $20 today, and you do it that way. I don't have millions of dollars to put in a campaign account, but I don't want millions of dollars to put in a campaign account. I want to earn American support. I don't want to earn anybody else's support. That's what I'm going for. That's what I'm going to do, and we're going to do it $5 at a time.
Ambassador Haley, keep coming back. What's the website again?
NikkiHaley.com. Join our movement. Let's get back to a strong and proud America. It's time for a new generation and a new direction, and we're going to get there.
Keep coming back, Ambassador. Much appreciate your time. Have a good time with Ruthless today. Be on your guard. They're ruthless.
I will take care of you.
Thank you.